Hey, everyone. I never thought I'd be the type to spill my guts on the internet, but here I am. There's a lesson in what I'm about to tell you, and maybe, just maybe, it'll save some of you from making the same mistakes I did. This isn't some fiction I've cooked up to entertain you. It's my life, my reality, and it's ugly as hell. But if sharing it keeps even one person from being as blind and clueless as I was, it's worth it. Let's start with the greeting, though. Hi, I'm the guy who got his life turned upside down because of a stupid joke. Yeah, you heard that right. A fucking joke revealed that my wife, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, was screwing around behind my back. But before I dive into the heart of that shitstorm, let me introduce myself properly, give you some context. You'll need it to understand just how badly I got played. I'm in my early 40s now, a brunette with a couple of grays creeping in. Thanks, life. I'm not a model or anything, but I'm fit to take care of myself. I've got a job that pays well enough, project manager for a mid-size firm. We're not swimming in cash, but we've never had to worry about bills either. I always thought I was doing okay, providing for my family, keeping the ship steady. But, man, I had no clue what was brewing underneath the surface. Now let's talk about her, Emma. We met about 13 years ago, and when I first saw her, I was floored. She's blonde, tall, with these sharp, striking features. Emma is the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. And trust me, I wasn't immune to that. I fell hard. I thought I hit the jackpot. She had this magnetic energy, always wanting more out of life, always striving for something bigger and better. I liked that about her at first. She pushed me, made me feel like we were building something together. But as the years went on, it became more obvious that bigger and better didn't include us. It was all about her. More attention, more compliments, more things. Expensive things, too. She loved designer bags, new phones, jewelry. I get her some of it when I could, but the truth is I could never really keep up with her appetite. Emma didn't work for the first few years of our marriage. She stayed at home with our son while I was out busting my ass to make ends meet. But when he started school, she got a job at some high-end gym as a personal trainer. Seemed harmless enough, right? I was just glad she had something to do other than spending money and complaining that I didn't have enough time for her. Now about her son. He's 8 now. And let me just say, I love that kid more than anything in this world. He's got red hair, which is the punchline to the joke that kicked off this whole mess. See, I'm a brunette. I'm his blonde. And our son, he's got this fiery red hair that doesn't match either of us. Sure, I know how genetics work and all that, but it's become a running joke between us. I make cracks about him being the neighbor's kid. Dumb stuff like that. Hey, maybe the mailman's got some explaining to do, I'd say. And Emma would usually laugh or roll her eyes. But this one time at dinner, I dropped the usual line. Maybe I should go have a talk with a neighbor about our redhead, I said, half laughing as I shoveled food into my mouth. It was supposed to be one of those harmless, tired jokes. The kind that lands flat because you've said it 1,000,000 times. Only this time, Emma's reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't laugh or roll her eyes. No, she froze just for a second, but it was there a flash of something. Her smile dropped for a millisecond before she forced it back up. I swear, it was like someone had hit the pause button on her face. I don't know why, but that look got stuck in my head. It was like I had hit a nerve, but I wasn't sure how or why. I tried to shake it off, but over the next few days, I started noticing more little things. And when I say little, I mean tiny. Things you wouldn't normally even register if you weren't already suspicious. Like how her phone was suddenly glued to her side all the time. Sure, we all have our phones on us, but Emma used to leave hers lying around without a second thought. Now it was always in her hand, her pocket, or face down on the table. And when it buzzed, she'd grab it like it was a ticking time bomb. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. Work was stressing me out, and I hadn't been home as much as I should have been. Late nights, early mornings, I was busting my ass to keep everything afloat. Emma had always complained about how much I worked, but in my mind, I was doing it for us, for her and our son. I figured the distance between us was just because of my job. But looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs sooner. And then there were the girls' nights. They weren't new. Emma's always had a circle of friends she'd go out with now and then, but they were happening more often. And she'd come home later and later, sometimes a little too drunk for just a casual night out with the girls. I'd ask her how it was, and she'd shrug it off like it was nothing. Just the usual, she'd say, maybe toss in a name or two of people I didn't know. I didn't push it. Why would I? She was an adult, and I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. See, here's the thing about trust. Once you get even the slightest reason to doubt it, you start questioning everything. You start playing detective in your own head. I'd lay in bed at night, thinking about that damn look on her face when I made the joke about our son's red hair. Was there something more to it? Was she hiding something? Or was I just being a jealous, insecure asshole? Now you might be wondering about my friends, Tom, Bob, and Rick. We've known each other for years since college, and they've always had my back. Every couple of weeks, we'd take off for a few days just to get away from the grind. We'd go fishing, hiking, sometimes even just rent a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was our time to decompress, do some manly shit, and forget about the rest of the world for a while. Emma hated those trips. Every single time I'd pack my bag, she'd throw me this look like I was abandoning her. "You're going off with your buddies again?" She'd say, "What about me? What about your family?" And maybe she had a point. Maybe I was selfish for wanting to escape now and then. But those trips kept me sane. They were my outlet, my way of blowing off steam, so I didn't lose my mind with all the pressure at work and at home. Besides, it's not like I was disappearing every weekend, just every couple of weeks. I thought it was harmless except while I was off with the guys. She was back home doing well, who knows what at the time. I didn't realize it then, but she wasn't exactly sitting around waiting for me. Now, I've always had a messed up sense of humor. It's got me into trouble more than once, but it's also saved my ass in some pretty tense situations. Little did I know, it was about to be the catalyst for unraveling my entire marriage. So after that little dinner table moment, where Emma froze after my dumb joke, I started getting this itch in the back of my mind. It was like a splinter I couldn't shake. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid or if something was actually wrong. But it got me thinking about relationships, cheating, and all that shit that never used to bother me. One night, I'm scrolling through YouTube trying to unwind after a long day at work. That's when I stumbled on this video. Some guy pranking his wife by pretending he was cheating on her. The guy just casually drops a fake confession and records her reaction, which, as you can imagine, was pretty over the top. She freaked out, started screaming, throwing stuff. The whole thing was supposed to be a joke, a way to get a rise out of her. And by the end, they're both laughing it off. For some reason, I couldn't stop watching it. It was dumb, but it stuck with me. Now here's where my own brand of stupid comes in. I started thinking, what if I did the same thing with Emma? She's always been jealous. Not of my friends, but of this imaginary harem of women she thinks I'm hooking up with whenever I'm out with the guys. I mean, every time I come back from one of those trips with Tom, Bob, and Rick, she'd start up with the same accusations. Where do you really go? Who are you really with? It was exhausting, to be honest. I'd try to reassure her, tell her it was just the guys, but she never seemed to believe me. The thing is, I never gave her a reason to be suspicious. I've never been the cheating type, but she was convinced that every time I wasn't glued to her side, I was off climbing in a bed with some random woman. So in my slightly twisted head, I figured, why not prank her like the guy in the video? Let her feel what it's like when the shoe's on the other foot. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. One night, after a few drinks at the bar with Tom and Bob, I came home feeling a little tipsy, but still in control. Emma was already in her usual mood, throwing passive-aggressive comments about how I was probably out with other women again. Normally, I just brush it off or argue with her. But this time, with the booze buzzing in my veins and that stupid YouTube video fresh in my mind, I decided to go through with it. I was going to pull off the best fake confession she'd ever heard. I quietly set my phone up on the counter, making sure it was angled just right so it could catch everything, then turned to her pretending to be all serious. I put on my best guilty face, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to sell it, make it believable. "Emma," I said, signed dramatically, "I need to tell you something. I've been cheating on you." I'll be honest, I was pretty damn proud of myself. I sounded convincing, like a real actor pulling off some Oscar-worthy performance. I thought she'd freak out, maybe throw some dishes or start screaming like the wife in the video. But no, she didn't do any of that. She just stood there, staring at me with this look I couldn't quite place. I remember thinking, what the hell is going on? Then she hit me with it. "Well," she said, folding her arms. I've been cheating on you too. At first I laughed. I mean, come on. We were in the middle of a prank, right? So I figured she was playing along, trying to one-up me. I even made some snide comment like, "Oh yeah? With who? Bob? Tom?" The words came out of my mouth as a joke, but her expression didn't change. She just looked at me dead serious. "Yes," she said, "with both of them." That's when the room started spinning, and it wasn't just the alcohol. My laugh died in my throat. "Wait, what?" I asked, feeling like I just stepped into a nightmare. "You're not serious, are you?" She didn't even blink. "I'm serious. I've been fucking both of them." For a moment, I thought I was still drunk, that maybe I misheard her. But no, the cold, hard truth was sinking in. I didn't know what to say, what to do. My heart was pounding in my chest. My head felt like it was going to explode. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to say it was all a joke, that she was messing with me, just like I'd been trying to mess with her, but the punchline never came. I don't remember much after that. The conversation blurred into shouting, accusations, and more words that I'll probably never fully recall. The only thing I do remember is stumbling out of the house at some point, sitting on the doorstep, clutching my head in my hands, feeling like my entire world had just collapsed. Because it had. That stupid prank, that little game I thought would be funny, had backfired in the worst way possible. It wasn't a joke anymore. This was my life, and everything I thought I knew about it was crumbling around me. Filing for divorce was the easy part. It was cold, clinical, and I'll admit, satisfying in a way, knowing I'd finally cut the cord with Emma. But after the paperwork was submitted, the questions started gnawing at me. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I needed something more closure, maybe, or some twisted sense of justice. And I knew exactly where to start, Tom. Emma's betrayal hurt. No question. But Tom, that was a different kind of pain. We've been friends for over a decade, ever since college. He wasn't just some guy I hung out with. He was someone I trusted. Someone who'd been there for the big moments in my life. My wedding, the birth of my son, the times I thought we were solid. And now I knew he'd been screwing my wife behind my back. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I couldn't just let it go. I wasn't the kind of guy who'd sit back and take it. I wanted retribution, plain and simple. Rick was the first person I turned to when I decided to take action. Out of our group of friends, he was always the one with the calm head, the guy who could think things through when the rest of us were just reacting. He hadn't been involved in the mess with Emma, and that alone made him someone I could rely on. After a long night of drinking and venting, I told Rick everything about Emma, Tom, Bob, the prank gone wrong, all of it. Rick was furious on my behalf. He didn't try to talk me out of it when I told him I needed to get even with Tom. Instead, he asked, "What do you want to do?" That's when the plan started to take shape. Tom had a lot to lose more than just his friendship with me. He had a good job, a wife, and 2 kids. That's right. He had a family too. He was living this picture-perfect life on the surface, all while screwing around with my wife behind the scenes. I wasn't just going to ruin his friendship. I was going to destroy the image he built, the one he pretended was so wholesome and solid. I was going to show him what betrayal really felt like. The first part of the plan was simple: gather evidence. Emma had deleted most of her messages, but Rick had a buddy who was a tech genius. He managed to recover some of the deleted text from her phone. And let me tell you, what we found was more than enough. Explicit texts, photos, plans for meetups. Tom wasn't just some casual fling for Emma. They'd been going at it for months, if not longer. Seeing it all in black and white was like pouring salt on a wound, but it also fueled the fire inside me. With the evidence in hand, I needed to figure out the best way to ruin Tom. It wasn't just about exposing the affair. It was about hitting him where it hurt the most: his reputation, his family. That's where Rick came in. He knew Tom's wife well, had been friends with her through various gatherings and events. She was a nice woman, didn't deserve to be in the dark about who she was married to. But we had to be careful. This couldn't be some emotional outburst that backfired. We needed to be smart, calculated. Rick and I arranged a casual get-together, something Tom's wife wouldn't suspect. It was a weekend barbecue. Nothing fancy. Just the kind of thing our group did from time to time. Tom and his family came smiling, laughing, completely unaware of what was coming. I watched them, and every laugh, every look of love his wife gave him made my blood boil. I wanted to storm over and break his nose right there, but I kept it cool. I had a bigger plan. After a few drinks, Rick and I managed to slip away with Tom's wife. Let's call her Katie for a private chat. We were subtle, didn't want to cause a scene. I could see the confusion in her eyes when we asked to talk to her alone, but she came along without questioning it too much. Once we were out of earshot, I pulled out my phone and showed her the text, the photos, everything. At first, she didn't believe it. She stared at the screen, her face pale, her eyes blinking as if she was trying to process what she was seeing. "This can't be real," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Tom would never, but it was real." And Rick, bless him, was there to back me up, confirming everything, even offering to let her talk to his tech friend if she needed proof of how we got the messages. We gave her space to let it sink in, but the devastation was clear. She was a good person, someone who didn't deserve this any more than I did. But I needed her to see the truth. I needed her to know the kind of man she was married to. Katie didn't cry or scream. She was stronger than I thought she'd be. She just stood there, staring at the ground for what felt like an eternity. Then she said, "What do we do now?" That's when I told her the rest of the plan. We weren't just going to confront Tom. No, that was too easy. I wanted him to feel trapped, cornered. Katie agreed to play along, and we set the trap for the following weekend. Another gathering, but this time, it was at Tom's place. When the day came, I could barely keep myself together. Tom had no idea what was coming, and seeing him act all buddy-buddy with me made my skin crawl. We let the day roll on like normal until finally the moment arrived. Katie took him aside, just like Rick and I had done with her, and confronted him. The whole neighborhood could probably hear their argument. Tom tried to deny it at first, but when she showed him the evidence, there was no escaping it. And then I stepped in. I walked into the room just as Katie threw the final bomb. "Jack showed me everything," she said, her voice cold as ice. Tom turned to look at me, his face pale, his mouth hanging open. I could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that his entire life was crashing down around him. That look, that was what I had been waiting for. The betrayal in his eyes mirrored my own. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a sliver of satisfaction. I didn't say much. There was no need. The damage was done. I just stood there, letting him see the cold fury on my face, knowing that his world was falling apart because of what he'd done. And I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Tom had been easy in the end. His family, his reputation, that was his Achilles heel. But Bob? Bob was a different story. The guy didn't have a family, didn't have much of a personal life, really. He lived for his career, always talking about his investments, his side hustles, and the next big score. Money was his weakness. If there was anything Bob cared about more than himself, it was his bank account. That's where I knew I could hurt him the most. After what happened with Tom, I didn't waste any time moving on to Bob. The anger that had been simmering for months was now a full-blown fire, and I was done holding back. It was personal, but it had to be smart. I couldn't just confront Bob like I did with Tom. It wouldn't have the same effect. No, Bob needed something different, something that would cut him deep, but leave no trace back to me. That's when I came up with the idea, financial fraud. Bob had always been boastful about his latest investments, always showing off the new ways he was making money, whether it was stocks, crypto, or some shady real estate deals. He loved feeling like the smartest guy in the room, like he was always one step ahead. But here's the thing. People like Bob get cocky. They think they're untouchable, that nobody can outsmart them. I was about to prove him wrong. The first step was to get Rick involved again. He had already helped me with Tom, but this time I needed his tech skills more than anything else. Bob was careful with his money, but Rick knew how to dig into the digital side of things. I laid out the plan for Rick over a few beers one night, and he didn't even hesitate. He was all in. We started by digging through Bob's public profiles, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the usual stuff. Bob liked to brag, so it wasn't hard to find out where he was investing and what he was excited about. He had a few properties he'd been bragging about, flipping them for profit. He'd mentioned some online investments as well, including a crypto exchange he was heavily into. It was a gold mine of information for us. The next step was finding a weak spot. Bob had been in some pretty questionable deals before. Things that skirted the line of legality, but nothing major enough to get him into real trouble. I figured if we could create something that looked legit enough, we could lure him in, and once he was in, he'd do most of the damage to himself. With Rick's help, We created a fake investment opportunity. We set up a slick-looking website for a fictional startup, one that promised big returns for early investors. It was the kind of thing Bob would jump at. New tech, high potential, lots of hype. We even populated the site with fake testimonials, links to dummy profiles on financial websites, and enough buzzwords to make it look legit. Then came the bake. I casually mentioned the opportunity to Bob during one of our conversations. We were having drinks after work, and he was going on about his latest crypto gains. So I slipped it into the conversation, acting like it was something I'd stumbled upon, but wasn't sure about. Of course, Bob's eyes lit up. He couldn't resist the idea of getting in early on something hot, especially if I was hesitant. He thought he was smarter than me, that he could spot a good deal where I couldn't. Over the next few days, I played it cool like I wasn't sure if I wanted to invest. Bob, though, he was hooked. He kept asking me about it, wanted to know more, pressing me for details. That's when I gave him the fake site and told him to check it out for himself. It didn't take long. A week later, Bob was in. He threw in a sizable chunk of cash, enough to make a dent in his portfolio if things went south, but not enough to bankrupt him. At least, not yet. The beauty of this plan was that once Bob was in, he did the rest of the work himself. He started pushing the investment to his contacts, trying to build his position, get others involved. That's how these scams work. The more people you get in, the bigger your slice of the pie. Bob didn't even realize he was stepping deeper into the trap. Rick and I waited until the timing was right. A few months in, after Bob had thrown even more money into the pot and was starting to see some returns, all fabricated, of course, we pulled the plug. The site went down. The company disappeared, and Bob's investment vanished into thin air. The fallout was immediate. Bob was livid, calling everyone he knew, trying to figure out what the hell had happened. He started pulling strings, contacting lawyers, but the thing was there was no trail. Everything had been scrubbed clean. The more he dug, the more he realized he'd been duped, and there was nothing he could do about it. And the worst part, he couldn't tell anyone. Bob had been scammed, and admitting that would mean admitting he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. I watched him unravel over the next few weeks. His confidence was shattered. He stopped talking about his investments, stopped bragging about his latest schemes. He was quieter, more reserved, like he'd taken a punch to the gut and was still trying to catch his breath. I didn't need to confront him, didn't need to rub it in his face. The loss itself was enough. Bob's whole identity was wrapped up in being the guy who always won, who always came out on top, and now he was just another sucker who got played. And the best part, he never knew it was me. As for Rick, he wiped his hands clean after it was all done. We didn't need to talk about it much afterward. We knew we'd done what needed to be done. I got my revenge on Tom and Bob, and the satisfaction of knowing they both paid for what they did. Was it enough? At the time, yeah. It felt like it. But in the back of my mind, I knew there was still one person left. Emma. After the fallout with Tom and Bob, you'd think the divorce process would have been the final nail in the coffin. The last chapter in a saga of betrayal and revenge. But no, that shit dragged on longer than I ever could have imagined. You see, Emma wasn't the kind of woman to walk away quietly. She wasn't just interested in splitting up and moving on. She wanted to bleed me dry in the process. At first, it seemed straightforward enough. We agreed to sell the house, split the assets, and go our separate ways. But when it came to the money, she started playing hardball. Specifically, she demanded an obscene amount of alimony, more than I expected given the fact that she had a job now. But that wasn't even the worst of it. What really threw me was her demand for child support. She wanted me to pay for our son, and she didn't want just the standard amount. No, she wanted to live comfortably off that check for years to come. The kind of money she was asking for could have funded her next shopping spree lifestyle without her lifting a finger. And for a while, I was resigned to it. I mean, I loved the kid. I'd raised him, been his father, and I figured, fine. I'll take the hit for him, even if it means I'll be working double shifts for the next decade. But something kept gnawing at me, especially after that joke about the neighbor's kid. The thought had always been in the back of my head, lingering there ever since Emma's face froze that night at the dinner table. And with everything that had come out about her cheating, I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I asked for a DNA test. It was the last resort, really. I didn't want to believe that the kid I'd raised for 8 years wasn't mine. But after everything Emma had put me through, I had to know for sure. Part of me felt like I was betraying him by even questioning it. But at the same time, I had to protect myself. I wasn't going to let Emma take everything from me. Not if there was even the slightest chance that she was lying about this too. The results came in a week later. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, staring at the envelope like it was a bomb about to go off. When I finally opened it, I felt like the world dropped out from under me. The test came back negative. The kid I'd been calling my son for nearly a decade wasn't mine. I just sat there, holding the paper, unable to move. There was anger, sure, but more than anything, I felt hollow, empty, like everything I'd built with Emma had been a lie from the very beginning. She'd lied about who she was, who I was, and even who my own son was. It felt like the final betrayal, the one that cut deeper than all the others combined. My lawyer? He was ready. He'd seen this kind of thing before, I guess, because the next steps came quickly. The DNA test blew Emma's whole case apart. Without that kid being mine, there was no way she could demand child support from me. She tried to fight it, of course, threw every excuse in the book at the judge, claiming I was still his father, that I'd raised him, that it didn't matter what the test said. But legally, it did matter. I wasn't on the hook for a single dime. The divorce process dragged on for months after that, but Emma had lost her leverage. We sold the house, and I took my half of the money. I wasn't interested in fighting for more. At that point, I just wanted out. I wanted to be done with her, with the lies, with everything that had turned my life into a nightmare. Once the house was gone, I packed up and moved to another city, far away from the madness that had consumed my life for too long. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I needed distance both physically and mentally from everything that had happened. New place, new job, new life. The memories of Emma, of the kid who wasn't mine, of the betrayals, they stayed with me, but I was determined not to let them define me anymore. I wasn't the same man who had made that dumb joke at the dinner table, oblivious to the storm brewing under my own roof. I was different now, maybe a little harder, a little colder, but also smarter. I'd been through the worst, and I come out the other side. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Update. It's been a while since I last posted, and a lot has changed since then. If you follow my story up to this point, you know how dark things got. How betrayal, divorce, and revenge became the center of my life. But now I want to give you all an update, because for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm finally in a place where I can breathe again. I've moved on. After the divorce and the house sale, I packed up and left that city. There was no point in staying. Too many memories, too much anger, and too many ghosts. I needed a fresh start, and moving to a new city gave me exactly that. It wasn't easy. Starting over never is, but it was necessary. I found a new job. Nothing fancy, but enough to pay the bills and keep me busy. And you know what? I've made new friends, built new routines, and started rebuilding my life piece by piece. The past still lingers, of course. There are nights when it all comes flooding back, and I wonder how I could have been so blind for so long. But those moments don't define me anymore. They're just echoes of a life I've left behind. I've learned to focus on the future rather than the past, and it feels damn good. I don't have much contact with Emma anymore. There's nothing left to talk about. The kid, while it's complicated, I'm not his father, not legally or biologically. But in my heart, part of me will always care about him. He was an innocent bystander in all of this, just as blindsided as I was. But for my own sanity, I had to create distance. Maybe someday, when he's older, we'll talk again. But for now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my own life. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been following my story, whether you've commented, messaged, or just read along quietly. Your support has meant more to me than you'll ever know. When you're going through hell, knowing you're not alone can make all the difference. So thank you. Really, it's been a long, brutal journey, but I'm standing on the other side of it now, and I wouldn't have made it without the encouragement from strangers. People like you who gave me hope when I had none. So, what's next for me? I'm not sure, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm staying focused on the present, trying to enjoy the little things again. Things I'd forgotten I could enjoy. I'm healthier mentally and physically than I've been in years, and that's something I'm proud of. To anyone who's going through their own version of hell right now, just remember this. You can get through it. It may seem impossible, but I'm living proof that life goes on. You'll heal, you'll grow, and you'll find your peace again. It takes time, but it's worth it. Thanks again to everyone who stuck by me through this roller coaster of a story. I wish you all success, happiness, and strength no matter where life takes you. Take care of yourselves, and never stop fighting for the life you deserve.